Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Essay Doctor, where I try and answer your questions about essays. Today's question is, what the hell is an adverbial? And of course, this is not a question that my students actually ask me as such, but I can feel it being formed into their minds as I am standing there in front of the whiteboard, wittering on about adverbials. Also, it has been a subject of some controversy in the UK press. Apparently, schools in Britain have been telling students to use fronted adverbials. And people are saying, like, what are these things and why are we wasting our time telling students to use them? Hey, adverbials are actually quite interesting and useful. And they make up the third class of linkers in this mini series on linkers we're doing. First, we talked about coordinate conjunctions. These are words like and, but, for, so. Then we talked about subordinate conjunctions, like because, while, and so on. And this leaves us with adverbial linkers. So the name sounds kind of like adverb, and that's because they are very closely related. All adverbs are adverbials, and not all adverbials are adverbs. So an adverbial can be an adverb. So she ran quickly. Okay. We've got a verb, ran, and an adverb that describes the verb, very straightforward. So an adverb is basically just an adjective with "ly" stuff on the end. However, they can also be a prepositional phrase. She ran up the stairs. So up is our preposition. So we've got a phrase with that. Okay. These are the most common types, but there are other ways that something can be an adverbial. For example, less commonly, a noun phrase. She ran this morning. This morning is a noun. Okay. Like I said, not so common, and also quite common, but not as useful for us at the moment. It can be an entire clause. She ran because she was late. And for the real grammar nerds here, this is why we call subordinate conjunctions subordinate, or subordinating conjunctions, some people say. It's because they introduce a subordinate clause, and that clause is subordinate because it is actually a comment on the main clause. Or in other words, it is an adverbial clause. So she ran because she was late. She ran is our main idea. Because she was late is a comment on that. That's what all of these have in common. This is the important part. An adverbial is something that comments on the sentence as a whole. And with a few exceptions, it is kind of outside the grammar of the sentence. In all of those cases, you could take the adverbial out and you would still have a sentence. She ran. That's fine. There are a few cases where it would mess up the sentence, but we're not interested in those at the moment. As I said, I'm trying to leave out any unnecessary grammar so we can get to the useful part, which is how to use adverbials to link ideas. Okay, so because of this grammatical variety, we have a ton of alternatives when we want an adverb. Yeah? Unlike coordinate conjunctions, which are a very small closed set, and subordinate conjunctions are slightly larger but still closed set, the number of potential adverbial linkers is kind of infinite. I mean, you could make them up if you wanted. These are just a few. However, on the other hand, in addition, moreover, in contrast, conversely, despite of this, because of this, due to this, nevertheless, on the contrary, despite this, furthermore, for this reason, consequently, as a consequence, as a result, subsequently, thus, therefore, even so, similarly, likewise, otherwise, notwithstanding, alternatively. And I am just scratching the surface here. I'm not today looking at, for example, adverbials of time, like at 5 o'clock. I'm only interested in the ones that function in a similar way to conjunctions, to link to ideas using causation or contrast, or comparison, something like that. Okay, so this grammatical flexibility means that we can move the adverb around a bit. Yeah? So She ran up the stairs quickly. She ran quickly up the stairs. She quickly ran up the stairs. And quickly she ran up the stairs. That last one, by the way, is what they mean when they say fronted. It's being bunged at the front of a sentence. And when you do that, you usually follow with a comma. Okay, quickly is, of course, an adverb, but the same thing applies to other adverbials, like however, on the other hand, all those ones I was just rattling out earlier. This can present problems with punctuation. The punctuation of adverbials is different from the punctuation of conjunctions. One of the things I write most often on essays is be careful with punctuation around linkers. Adverbial linkers are not the same as conjunctions. I'm sure my students love reading that. Okay, so here we've got a coordinate conjunction. This was the first thing we looked at. Adverbials are confusing, but they are useful. Or you could even just say adverbials are confusing but useful. Remember, coordinate conjunctions can link to adjectives or to nouns, as well as to clauses. Okay, so we've normally got two clauses joined by a conjunction in the middle, and there's a comma before the conjunction. I did also mention you can split them up, but it's not so common in formal writing. Then we looked at subordinate conjunctions, where you can move the clauses around. So although adverbials are confusing, comma, they are useful. Or you could say adverbials are confusing, although they are useful. Both of those work. Now let's throw in an adverbial. Sorry, now let's throw in an adverbial linker. Okay, so adverbials are confusing, however, they are useful. Now what we've got here is two sentences, and they are not joined by a conjunction. They could be two sentences completely on their own, and the fact that we have however at the beginning does not change the grammar of the sentences. As I said, adverbials normally stand outside the grammar of the sentence. Because of that, we have a full stop before it, and we have a comma after the however, and this is to prevent it kind of blurring into the rest of the sentence, because you can have sentences with however that aren't like this. For example, however hard he tried, he could not pass the exam. That's a different kind of however. So just to make it really clear that the real sentence starts after however, we put a comma after it. Okay. That's the easiest way to punctuate adverbials. If you're not sure about punctuation, then I suggest you stick to that. But you can do some clever things with adverbials. Now, this is the standard one that I just mentioned. Now take a look at this. What I've done here is replace the full stop with a semicolon. This is where we start getting fancy, because normal people do not use semicolons. There are two kinds of people who use semicolons. One is computer programmers, and the other is people doing academic or technical writing. We love semicolons. And the reason why we love semicolons is that it's a way to join two sentences without using a coordinate or a subordinate conjunction. Remember, however, is not a conjunction, it's an adverbial. We could actually have the same sentence without the however in. We could just say, adverbials are confusing, they are useful. Sounds a bit odd, but it's perfectly grammatical. And a lot of the time, we do that. We just sling two sentences together with a semicolon. It's just a way to say, okay, these two sentences have something in common, work out what it is. If you don't want people to work out what it is, then you spell it out by using an adverbial. However, it tells us that there's some kind of a contrast here. Now, this is where it gets really clever. So this is like level 3. So we've got the same thing. We've got our two sentences joined with a semicolon. And we put the however after the verb. They are, however, useful. And again, note that we have commas here. to separate, however, from the rest of the sentence. Like I keep saying, adverbials are outside the grammar of the sentence. You don't want them getting mixed up in your syntax. Okay. So if the verb is be, then you can stick your adverbial after the verb. Okay, it looks a lot more classy. It is, however, tricky because where you can put the adverbial does vary according to the type of sentence. So look at this. This has the same structure as the last one we looked at. Mary likes jazz. Okay, that's one sentence. We finished with it. I could put a semicolon there. It's up to me. Samantha is, in contrast, bored by it. So here we've got the same thing. We've got the verb is to be, is in this case. And we've got our adverbial after the verb and separated off with commas. Mary likes jazz. Samantha, in contrast, prefers death metal. Now, if the verb is not be, it's a normal verb, then generally the adverbial goes between the subject and the verb, or in other words, in front of the verb. Samantha, in contrast, prefers death metal. And just to make things really confusing, if you have a verb with two parts, you have a main verb and an auxiliary verb, then we usually stick the adverbial in the middle. God knows why we do this, but it does sound kind of cool. Mary likes jazz. Samantha has, in contrast, destroyed her Charlie Parker albums. Now, apart from asking why she would want to do that, this is an example of an adverbial kind of splitting a verb in the middle. It sounds, like I said, it sounds kind of cool, like informal writing, academic writing, technical writing, that kind of thing. It really can make you look intellectual. On the other hand, if you are uncertain of grammar and punctuation, and particularly if English is not your native language, you might want to play it safe and just stick the adverbial at the beginning. So, in contrast, Samantha has destroyed her Charlie Parker albums. That works just as well, and it's a lot safer, but it's your choice. So, what then is the point of all this? Why should you use adverbials when you can actually say pretty much everything you want with conjunctions? Well, adverbials, as we've seen, there are so many of them, they end up having a much more precise meaning than mere conjunctions. I mean, think about but. But is, just means but, not a very interesting linker. If you look at the adverbials that are sometimes grouped under a heading, like but type linkers, so we have, however, we have in contrast, we have on the other hand, they all mean something slightly different. So if I say something like, he's intelligent, but he's aggressive. Okay, let's say we're discussing a potential candidate for a job. So this guy, he's a computer whiz, but he's aggressive. Now, that's kind of brutal because it's a general rule, ignore everything before the but. What I'm saying here quite clearly is that we don't want him because he's aggressive. If I say he's intelligent, on the other hand, he's aggressive, then I'm just, could go either way. And this is true for a lot of these adverbials. You have a lot more choice onto the subtle shades of meaning that you can put in. So I do recommend you use adverbials. Whether you front them or not is entirely up to you. Obviously, the people who design English syllabuses in the UK have thought that fronted adverbials are very classy and students should use them. In fact, I would say sticking an adverbial in the middle of a sentence is even classier, But as I said, it can blow up in your face if you're not 100% sure of English grammar. So if in doubt, yes, front your adverbials. That is the easiest place to put them. Hey, so I hope that was useful. That is the end of this episode of the Essay Doctor.